Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today I'm looking at some Dynasty buys. Make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe. Let's jump into our first player. So, Odunze. So, obviously, Odunze doesn't have an NFL track record, but he was an elite college prospect. In 2022, in 12 games, he had 75 catches, 1,145 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then in 2023, 92 catches, 1,640 yards, and 13 touchdowns, both at Washington. He was drafted 9th overall and would have been the rookie wide receiver 1 in most classes. But in this one, of course, there's Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, so he's wide receiver 3, which I think is depressing his value a little bit. Now, why do I have Odunze as a dynasty buy? Couple reasons. One, people are afraid of offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. Number 2, there's a little bit of a redraft mindset going on. And number 3, I think once we see it, that being Odunze on the field, it's going to be a little too late. So now to kind of combine the first two, Odunze is being faded in redraft and dynasty to a degree because offensive coordinator Shane Waldron misused a completely different player, Jackson Smith-Njigba, last year. It doesn't matter that JSN and Odunze have nothing in common. They're not even being used the same way by Waldron. JSN was a slot-only player. Odunze is playing the outside, but leaving the field in 2 wide receiver sets. So they're 2 completely different players. Once we see Odunze's talent in a real game, it will be too late to buy him. Now, I have a couple of trades, and these are all from the Dynasty Daddy trade database, which is going to be my new source for these trades. I think it's the best trade database out there. Number 1, buy Odunze and Adonai Mitchell for Nico Collins and a 25-second. I'd rather have Odunze over Collins in Dynasty, and Mitchell looking pretty good. Mitchell over 25-second seems very fair. So I'll take the Odunze side here. Second one, buy Odunze for Brandon Ayuk. There's some issues with Brandon Ayuk. I think I would rather just have Odunze at this point. He's over 5 years younger. Probably don't think about it that way. Maybe 4.5 years younger, something like that. But yeah, I definitely my value of Brandon Ayuk is going down. So this was a real trade as well. And then the last one I think is the best one. You could buy Odunze for Travis Etienne. Actually, the real trade had Malachi Corley on the Odunze side. So it was actually even worse. You never know what will happen. You have to try it. If you don't try it, you don't know. So I would look at trying to buy Odunze before the season starts. Next player, Tyjae Spears. So Spears was solid in his rookie year on limited work. In 2023, he had 100 carries, 453 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4.5 yards carry, and 52 catches for 385 yards and a touchdown. Excellent receiving usage and good rushing efficiency. Now, why do I have Spears as a dynasty buy? Well, Tony Pollard is the running back 1 right now. There's redraft overreaction, short-term thinking, that kind of thing. Yes, Tony Pollard appears to have a slight edge on Spears right now. It's not like Spears is going to disappear. Pollard is 27 years old and suffered a major efficiency dip last season. The Titans have literally no one else. So Spears is both a PPR deep flex option and a handcuff with RB1 upside if something were to happen to Pollard. Again, people overreact to the latest little bit of news. Oh no, Tony Pollard took all of the first drive in preseason. Well, that's it. Tony Pollard is going to be all the work all year. I don't know about that. That's not what I'm thinking. That's not what Coach Brian Callahan has said. So let's not overreact. This is an opportunity to get a talented player that we have seen in the NFL be talented at a significantly depressed price. Here are some options. You could buy Tyjae Spears for Chuba Hubbard and Jerome Ford. 2 players that are maybe have temporary value, but I'm telling you, Jerome Ford is just a guy. Jerome Ford is not good. Chuba Hubbard, kind of the same thing. Chuba Hubbard is not actually good. They're just okay. You could buy Tyjae Spears for 25-second. I like that. Or you could buy Tyjae Spears for Aaron Jones. Now, Aaron Jones has value right now. If we get to week 1 and Aaron Jones comes out and looks less than spectacular, Aaron Jones will not have value anymore. Aaron Jones is already 29. He's 7 years older than Spears. He's had a long career. I think you're much more likely to get something out of the rest of Tyjae Spears' career than the rest of Aaron Jones's career. But overall, I like the idea of buying Tyjae Spears before the season starts. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. You get my rankings, access to the Discord, and the ability to ask in-advance questions for the YouTube videos. Tiers begin at just $6 a month and include all of that. And this channel will remain Dynasty Fantasy Football. If you want to ask me any redraft questions, see my redraft rankings, that's only on the Patreon. Start sit content, only on the Patreon. It will not be offered for free. It will only be done for paying customers this year. That's not going to change. I've already made up my mind about that. So if you're interested in my start sit advice, which has been very popular in the past, that will only be for patrons. And you can sign up by clicking the link in the top right corner. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my Why You Should Join the Patreon video on the channel. It's on the front page of the channel under Patreon promos. I'm going to do another one detailing start sit later. And I really appreciate everyone who signed up and any new patrons who join. It helps keep my independent content going. But with that said, we'll go on to our next player. Bo Nix. So, like Odunze, obviously, Bo Nix only has college stats, but Nix was not the same level of prospect. His play at Auburn from 2019 to 2021, I'll just say, was not NFL worthy. But in 2022 and 2023 at Oregon, he excelled. 2022, 71.9% completion, 8.8 yards per attempt, 3,593 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 89 carries, 510 yards, and 14 rushing touchdowns, which is great for fantasy. Then last year, 77.4% completion, 9.6 yards per attempt, 4,508 yards, 45 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, which is wild, and 54 carries, 234 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Now, why do I have Bo Nix as a dynasty buy? Take lock and sneaky rushing upside. People just hated Bo Nix as a prospect. He's not a bad prospect, but I think this is an example of following college football really closely actually hurts you as an evaluator. Because if you were really deep in that Auburn tape, you just can't get past it. Can't get past it. Hey, Bo Nix is bad. He's bad. But he was drafted with the 12th overall pick. You know, he has rushing upside. He will start week 1. We have to move on. We have to move on to the reality instead of looking at stuff that was 3 years ago. So, by all accounts, he's looked really good in camp. And the rushing upside, I think, is going to be the difference between Bo Nix just being okay and him actually having some fantasy value, especially in Superflex leagues. Now, some trade ideas for Nix. Number 1, buy Bo Nix for Christian Watson in a 26-second. Obviously, these are all Superflex. I don't believe in Christian Watson at all. Not even a little bit. He's, to me, one of the most overhyped players in all of fantasy. I would love to remove Christian Watson from my team and get a quarterback in Superflex. I would much rather have the Bo Nix side here. It's not very close for me. This one's even easier. Bo Nix for Geno Smith and Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler doesn't do anything for me. And Geno Smith, I would bet against Geno Smith being a starter next year. So I would much rather have Bo Nix here. And then the last one I think is the closest one. But you can buy Bo Nix for Terry McLaurin. At the end of the day, Terry McLaurin is 29 in September. Bo Nix is a starting quarterback who's significantly younger. So in Superflex Dynasty, I'd have to take Bo Nix, but this is probably the closest of the 3. Now, we're going to jump into some NFL news. I have a lot of it, so we're going to cover as much of it as I can. First up, Samaje Perine signs with the Chiefs. The Chiefs added Perine to their backfield. He joins starter Isaiah Pacheco, Carson Steele, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. In Dynasty, I would rate the 3 running backs Steele first, then Perine, then Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Unfortunately, I think we should probably roster all 3 until we see week 1. I think that Steele obviously is going to have a role on game days. He plays special teams. He has the fullback hybrid spot. He's going to play. The question is whether they're going to have Perine or Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the other running back on game days. Neither does anything on special teams. I would guess that it's Perine because he was better last year, and especially as a pass catcher. So I'd lean his way. But for now, I would keep all three Chiefs running backs behind Pacheco if you possibly can. Next up, Russell Wilson was named the Steelers' Week 1 starting quarterback. Over the past few weeks, this kind of became obvious. I still think that Russell Wilson is completely cooked. I think this is your final sell window for Wilson. I would sell Wilson for a 25-second and just move on. As for Justin Fields, he remains a hold to me because of his rushing upside. You're not going to sell him for anything worth anything. I mean, if I could pay a future second in Superflex and get Justin Fields, I might do it. Because if he ever goes in, we know he's a quarterback one right away and you're not risking much. But if you have him already, there's really not much you can do. I would just hang on to him. Next, Jacoby Brissett was named the Patriots Week 1 starting quarterback. I mean, I guess this was kind of what I expected. Why Gerard Mayo said that Drake May was better and then named Jacoby Brissett the Week 1 starter, I have no idea. That was stupid of him. It makes him look like a fool. But I already think he's a fool, so nothing's probably going to change my mind about that. For Dynasty, this changes nothing for me. The only actionable thing is to sell Brissett for anything you can get. I'd take any third in a year. I have no interest in Jacoby Brissett. You're not even going to play him in Superflex leagues on this team. So if you can get anything for Jacoby Brissett, I would, and just move on. I have no interest in him whatsoever. Next up, Noah Brown signs with the Commanders. Unlike a lot of signings, Brown went directly to the active roster. Low-key, I think there could be some relevance here, as Brown, to me, is immediately the Commanders' wide receiver 2. Last year, in 10 games, he had 33 catches, 567 yards, and 2 touchdowns on 55 targets. 3.3 catches and 56.7 yards a game. That's not insignificant. And way more than anything Dyami Brown or Olamide Zaccheaus has done. So I'm not getting carried away, but he's probably more relevant than he was on the Texans, where he was the wide receiver 4 at best. He's just 28 years old. 2023 was his best year. He might contribute. I'm probably picking him up in deeper dynasty leagues. These types of wide receivers are not my favorite players to roster, but he should be rostered in most dynasty leagues of a decent size. Next up, Taylor Heinicke traded to the Chargers. The Chargers gave up a conditional 6th-round pick for Heinicke. Now, Heinicke's immediately a massive upgrade to Easton Stick as the backup to Justin Herbert. In deep Superflex leagues, I would add Taylor Heinicke. Most backup quarterbacks who would have any fantasy relevance are rostered. So he's someone I would absolutely add in all deep Superflex leagues. And lastly, D'Onta Foreman returns to the Browns. I did expect this, but teams don't usually play roster games with players who are important, right? I think this is fully a Jerome Ford backfield with Foreman and Pierre Strong mixing in a little until Nick Chubb returns, but I don't want either of them all that much. Neither of them are my favorite stashes in Dynasty, but I'd probably roster both Foreman and Strong in Dynasty until we see week 1 at the very least. Now, I only have one Patreon question today because it's a very long show, so we'll jump into that very quickly. Which player that was cut surprised you? I really have 2. Number 1, Evan Hull. I can't believe that the Colts cut him. I expected him to be the RB3 behind Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon. I really liked Evan Hull as a prospect. I was actually kind of stunned. They did bring him back to the practice squad, but clearly they have no expectation. I mean, he's done nothing in a year plus in the NFL. You don't need to bother with him in Dynasty. And then secondly, Tim Patrick. He was playing as a starter throughout the preseason. The Broncos have a rookie quarterback. Why they didn't keep Tim Patrick, who has proven he can play in the NFL when they have not much other than Cortland Sutton at wide receiver, I have no idea. Now, if you like the video, make sure to drop a like and leave a comment with your thoughts. As always, the best way to support the channel is to subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty, Redraft, Start Sit, and more. Every sign-up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all